I was like, do I need a bodyguard? He said, you're one of the most hated men in this country.
You probably know Blair from his many, many credits. He was in last year's horror thriller Longlegs. He had a guest role on Sex and the City. He's won an Emmy and a Grammy. He's been nominated for the Golden Globes and a Tony Award. We're going to talk about some of his very famous roles later on. Youngblood, the new movie he's starring in, just had its premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival. But it's a great joy to say he joins me now to talk about it. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Tom. It's great to see you.
Nice
Thank
to
you
see
for
you
having me.
I feel like you should get an award just for being in Toronto in the winter to shoot this thing.
It wasn't that bad. I shot here like maybe 15. No, wait a minute. My daughter was 11. She learned to walk here, 11 months old. She's now 27. So 27 years ago.
27.
And that winter, in the middle of the winter, it was bitter, bitter, bitter cold. This wasn't that bad.
You didn't find it that bad?
No.
Okay,
no.
good.
I live in Utah, so, we have...
Yeah, it's not like you're
winters.
it's not like you're in Southern
Florida,
California or something like that. I understand.
Right.
I read that it wasn't the hockey angle that drew you to this role. You weren't like a big time hockey fan, but I read something interesting about what you said about taking on this role of playing a hockey dad. You said, whenever I can see Black people in an unexpected light and to tell those stories, portray those stories, I'm drawn to it.
Yeah.
What did you find unexpected about this story?
Well, the fact that you're telling a story about Black people of color, Black people in hockey.
Yeah.
That is something I unfortunately did not know a lot about hockey before I took on the role.
Yeah.
But I knew that was something I didn't see much of. I had seen Hubert Davis, who directed this film. I had seen Black Ice, which was about Black players playing hockey. But it's not something I saw in a narrative form, on screen. So that I found fascinating. I spent some of my life, I was an Army brat growing up. My dad was in the military, U.S. military. And we moved every 2 years. So there were times when I was one of few, and one time the only Black kid in my whole school up in Michigan, Warren, Michigan at the time. And, just having that perspective on life, being one of few, a fish out of water, if you will, I found in my career, it's always fascinating when when I can see and I know that we were there as people of color, we existed and or exist present day, but what's that story? When you're that fish out of water.
Yeah, like you yourself went to school in Michigan. You were the lone Black person in a sea of white people in Michigan, and then you see this kid playing hockey in a sport where it's almost, it is exclusively white people in this story, and it's almost that in the real NHL.
Yeah.
And you say to yourself, okay, well, I understand this guy.
Yeah, that's right. It gave me an in, and it definitely turned my head to say, okay, what is that story?
Yeah.
I want to understand that. And also because, what we do, it's about bringing it to an audience. You can also help enlighten people and open their minds in such a way just by the mere virtue that you're entertaining them.
I think that sports is good like that too. Like I know in the early 90s you were in Soul of the Game. You played Jackie Robinson in Soul of the Game. Like it tells me that you see sports movies as more than just sports movies. They're an opportunity to do something else.
No, absolutely. In this movie in particular, it is a hockey film, and that you have great visceral hockey scenes. The sports scenes are really, really fantastic. But it is, I'd say, more about the characters off the ice, and that development of Dean, the male lead, really his journey in hockey, which is and his relationship with his girlfriend and with his dad. Yeah. Of course. So it's really a nice balance. So I think even people who are not hockey enthusiasts will be drawn to this film. But if you're into hockey, you'll love especially the hockey scenes.
You know how to get the Canadians interested right now. Right there. So let's talk about Blaine. Blaine is the father of an up-and-coming hockey player named Dean. Dean has this reputation on the team for being a rough player. You, his dad, have prepared him for a life where he needs to have an eye for an eye attitude. He needs to be aggressive. He needs to fight back. Some of the early scenes in the film is you teaching him how to punch, teaching him how to fight. I find, even when I was reading it, I find it hard to talk about that relationship because I don't want to say, oh, he's rough, because he had to be. I don't want to say that the father let him down because maybe he had to teach him what he did. I would love to know, as both an actor here and also as a father to sons, how you see this character.
It's an old school way of thinking, for sure, but it is an approach to parenting that definitely Blaine feels is necessary, to your point.
Yeah.
To push this child, to prepare this child for this world, and this child, and the specificity of who this child is. This child who is black,
Yeah.
going into this white world, who has to excel and compete as a top athlete. But how do you do that with the psychology you have? How do you do that within the world in which we live?
Yeah.
You know, and whatever racial dynamics there are, or that can be a hindrance to you. How do you overcome those obstacles? So it's necessary. He is very aggressive, and my character, the father, very complex, and he's very hard.
Loves them though.
Very hard on the kid, but loves them. That's right. I really believe it's driven by love, and that's what was important to me, to portray this character, that you saw just that he loves, but we love in different ways. And I think his way of loving it would be considered outdated to this day.
Yeah.
You know, he's not a helicopter parent at all. He's not someone who hugs his kids and says he loves them.
Yeah.
So it's really more of an old school way of thinking I've seen.
I want to talk about your own dad in a second, but as I mentioned, you're a father to sons yourself. Did it make you think about how you raised your own sons?
Oh, 100%. 100%. You know, actually, there's a scene in there where I tell the boys that you have to work twice as hard to be considered half as good. That's something, especially most people of color, and in your country and my country, around the world, understand. And that was just an ad lib. I was talking to my boys, and there was some scripted parts, and I threw that in there.
Oh, you threw that in?
Yeah. And Hubert kept that in the film. And a number of people, spoke to that yesterday after the screening. Like, that, of course, made sense. It is an element of life, and it's kind of how I walk through life. You know, who we are and the specifics and the characteristics of who we are make us unique and different. But I don't lead with my race.
Yeah.
I happen to be a black guy,
right,
from America,
right.
You know, but it's my humanity I lead with, and the film is constructed in that way. It's really not about that. There are nuances and there are dynamics that will come to fore, and it's really almost inferred without being hit all over the head with the fact that, you know, this guy is black. He's dealing with certain things. It's so much more than that.
It reminds me of how you talked about, I've heard you talk about your dad. I dug up this old interview, I think it was in Stars and Stripes, of you talking about your dad he was in the military, the U.S. military. And it's from like the mid-'90s or something like that. What was your father's name, if you don't mind me asking?
Colonel Frank Underwood Sr.
And he, is he still with us?
He is. He's 93 years old.
Go away. How's he doing?
He's doing great. He just came out to visit us 2 weeks ago. I had my birthday, and he flew out with my brother and sister from Virginia to Utah, which was great.
God love him. It was, well, wish him the best for me.
Thank you. I will.
He'll know who I am.
Yeah.
He's a big Canadian public radio listener. I don't know if you know that, but he has a secret love of the CBC.
I did know that. See that?
I couldn't help but think about Blaine's character, and the way even though you say he's old school, like, fists up, the way you talk about your father in this article is so different. You say he taught you to show respect, never disrespect people in front of others, and let people save face. This feels like the full...
I said that?
Yeah. This feels like the full... Does it feel accurate? Like, this feels like the full opposite of that character. Did this character also make you reflect on how you were brought up?
Yes. How it made me think about how I was brought up and how different my dad was. You know, he was from that generation, but, they called him the man of steel and velvet. You know, he was very much a disciplinarian, but he was cool with it. He had the velvet touch. You understood before you got disciplined. You had an understanding because he made sure you understood.
Yeah.
Why he was going to whip that.
It wasn't just pure discipline.
No.
It was in effort of something.
An effort of understanding. So that I and my brother, usually we were getting in trouble together, would not do the same thing over and over. I did want to say, you asked about my boys, being a father to boys.
Yeah.
So I have 2 boys and 1 daughter. Biologically, my wife and I have 9. Blended family.
Oh, lovely.
9 kids. But raising boys, young black boys in America is an interesting thing in the world today. And it was important for me to teach them, I think, as I've tried to live life, as my parents lived life, is to let excellence be the best deterrent to racism. Just be excellent. Work twice as hard to be considered half as good. The understanding of that. But also not allow it to make you become embittered, to be angry all the time, to react, which is the very thing that this father in the movie Blaine does, and it's the very thing that Dean, his son, how he reacts and responds in the first half, and that's where his education and trajectory comes from.
Why did your dad have that attitude? If you say that there was that was an old school attitude, was to kind of lead with your fist first, and you say always show respect, why would a man of that generation? Why did he have that perspective?
It's a great question. He grew up in Steubenville, Ohio. He was a country boy up in the mountains of Steubenville and Wintersville, Ohio. He was his class president in the late 1950s. He was one of maybe 2 or 3 black kids in his school in Ohio.
Yeah.
So I think he learned at a very young age to not, again, lead with the neon light of race and I'm this person. He told me when I was 10 years old, he said, walking into a room, you're making a political statement just because you are a black kid or a black man. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to lead with that. Just be great at what you do. So he learned that at a young age. I think his dad was the same way. His dad was one of the first black police officers in Steubenville, Ohio. I'm talking about in the 1930s. And so he learned that from his dad, I think, and he learned to be excellent on his own. He became a military officer, as we discussed, in the 1960s. As a black officer in the United States Army was rare at the time. So I think just his lived experiences taught him that, and he taught us the same thing.
It sounds like you have such a love for him.
Oh, that's my hero.
You have that excellence right from the very beginning, but I'm always really curious about the people who help you along the way. So when you first started acting, you had an acting coach you were training when you were at Carnegie Mellon. Her name was Angela D'Ambrosia.
Oh, yeah.
Who I was reading was hugely influential for you. Why did she help you unlock as an actor? She
was. I had great teachers. Marie Manigo was my teacher in high school. Angela D'Ambrosia was my teacher at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She pushed me. She was tough. She pushed all of her students, and I need it, and I think need that. I love being challenged with any kind of work, anything that's expected of me. I think it's one of the things that's driven me in my whole career is being probably underestimated or told no, that you can't do something or you can't be successful in this career or whatever it is. But Angela D'Ambrosia was just a very heart person. She understood emotions and she understood human nature, and she really helped me have an understanding of that when I came to college. What was I, 17, 18, 19 years old, trying to figure out myself, but also try to figure out how to build characters, how to create characters, how to tell stories through a character and their progression. So she was very special. I credit her for a lot of that, understanding of that.
She credited you? I mean, it's dark to say, but I actually found her obituary and you were mentioned in it. Like you were,
Really?
Yeah, as like a prize in the Pittsburgh, I think, Gazette, or like as a prize student.
Oh, that's very sweet. I didn't realize that.
And you were obviously very good. You started working right away, right?
Yeah.
pretty quickly right out of school, right?
Yeah, it was my second day in New York. Yeah, I got a chance to be on the Cosby Show in 1985. Yeah, it was their very first season.
And when was Crush Groove? When was the...
Crush Groove was later that year, 85. Yeah, it opened. I moved to New York in January of '85. Cosby Show was my second day it happened, and then it opened up doors. And Crush Groove opened in the theaters October of '85.
Crush Groove, for people who don't know, is this like iconic hip hop film about in the early days of hip hop.
Yeah.
With the real people in it. Like Sheila E. was in it, Run DMC was in it.
That's right.
Beastie Boys were in it.
Curtis Blow, the Fat Boys. Yeah.
How did
New Edition even? LL Cool J was 16 years old.
No way,
yeah,
really?
Yeah.
Tell me something. Tell me a story about that. What do you remember about? I mean, these are all legends you were around. At this time. Yeah.
I just remember I was so nervous because I was just out of college, man. And you're right, they were hot then.
Oh, they were famous then, right?
Yeah.
85 they would have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Run DMC was huge. They were selling all kinds of records, and Sheila E. was Prince's protege, of course, at the time. She had that hit song out called "The Glamorous Life," and this producer and director had just done a movie prior to that called "The Last Dragon." And Vanity, if you remember Vanity 6, another Prince protege.
Yeah.
She was the lead in that, and then they brought Sheila E. here, and I was like, wow, this is gonna be fun. That was my first love scene, first kiss on screen, first
Sheila E. too,
like
cool.
It was amazing. So they, I just remember being like the young kid, kind of the fly on the wall, because they really were stars, established stars, and I was the unknown coming along. This kid who just came out of Carnegie Mellon. So I just really tried to learn and grow. And somebody on that set told me at the time, he said, this was 1985.
Yeah.
He said, this chance doesn't come along necessarily that often, so just ride the wave as long as you can. So I've been riding it for 40 years now.
Did Prince show up? Was he ever around?
No, he never did.
I
was hoping.
I bet, but I'm glad you got to
I met him later, years
Oh, did you really? How was that?
Yeah. It was cool. It was very short. You know, there's a friend of mine who's a director. She's directed a lot of his films. Senna Hemry is her name, and a producer. And I did a Mary J. Blige video that Senna directed and asked me to do it. And then she did a movie called Something New and asked me to be in the film with Sanaa Lathan. And I did it. So at the premiere, you know, I knew they were very close. So at the premiere, she invites Prince, and he's sitting right in front of me. And I was like, that's Prince. That's very cool. And she said, hey, listen, we're having an after party at Prince's house. You want to come over afterwards? I was like, yeah, I want to check out Prince. So I just remember being in the kitchen, and in his kitchen in his house, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder. I look up and don't see anybody, and I look down. I was like, oh, that's Prince. What's up, man?
Hold up. Oh, yeah, there he is.
Yeah, but no, he was very cool, very humble. See, Tom, you got me telling stories I didn't even know I was going to tell. I
mean, I just knew when you said I met Prince, I was like, well, everyone has a story. Like, I have yet to meet anyone who doesn't have a story about meeting him.
Right.
After that, you land the role that really put you on the map. A young lawyer named Jonathan Rollins on the NBC's legal drama L.A. Law.
I understand, sir, but I've already been offered 71 with Horton Gold.
So much for your doctrine of less is more.
Sometimes more is more.
Well, perhaps we could reach as high as 57.5?
With all due respect, Mr. Brackman, this is not a negotiation. Gentlemen, it's been a genuine honor and a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Could you give us till the end of business today?
Of course, sir.
Around that time, I read you talking about, I mean, this kind of goes back to your dad, to lead with humanity. You were talking a lot about how stereotypical roles were for black actors in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
When you land this role, what do you hear from other people in the industry? What happens for you?
Oh, my God. Well, you have to understand, this was 1985.
Yeah.
And L.A. Law was the #1 drama on television. The Cosby Show was #1 show overall. It was comedy at 8 o'clock on Thursday nights on NBC in the States. We were at 10 o'clock Thursday nights on NBC. And it was extraordinary, man. I mean, I was, I think, 23 years old. And the first season, they came out of the box like gangbusters and became this huge hit. So I walked in, my first episode was the first episode of the second season. So I knew what I was walking into. It wasn't like we're figuring this out. And and Stephen Bochco created the show and gave me that break, made that decision, and hired me. And it absolutely changed the trajectory of my life and career. And I often say, and I mean it, doors are open to this day that are open because of the success of that show.
Did it feel important? Did the role feel like you were that you having the role felt important?
You know, I learned it was important later on. I really was this young kid just trying to get a gig, trying to get a job, and I got a job on this very successful show. So it was fun, and it was lucrative. I didn't know until later how important it was. And just quick story, I met Winnie Mandela when Nelson Mandela was freed from South Africa.
Yeah.
And she had come to the States, and I was part of one of the founders of an organization called Artists for a New South Africa. And we basically were just trying to keep attention on Nelson Mandela being imprisoned in South Africa. And I meet her at a backyard party, and she's walking down the line, and she sees me, and she just lights up. She throws her arms around me, and she says, "Every child in my country wants to be you."
Really?
And I knew it wasn't me, it had nothing to do with me, but it's what these children saw in this. I was 22, 23 years old at the time. This young kid who was this young upstart who was brash and bold, this character of Jonathan Rollins, who was a young lawyer. And they said, I want to be confident like that. I want to be successful like that. And if you remember L.A. Law at the time, it was all about aspirational living, the suits, and it was Los Angeles at the time, the glitz and glamour of that. So, and there are many stories like that. Jeffrey Redebe, who was in prison with Nelson Mandela. We did one episode in L.A. Law where my character was going to quit the firm unless they divested in South Africa, because they were investing money in South Africa. It's just, to me, it's really just another episode. It wasn't until I met him later, he said, we, including Nelson Mandela, because it was the #1 show in South Africa. He said, we watched that show, and it just reminded us that people are paying attention in the outside world.
Wow.
And then I knew one other thing, if I may.
Yeah.
in that one episode, I was on the show for 7 years. One of the seasons, I had an interracial relationship with Cecil Hoffman, beautiful blonde hair, blue eyes, and great actress. When I went to South Africa, I had this bodyguard who was with me. And again, it was the #1 show in South Africa.
And you just went on a press tour, or you went on a...
Yeah, no, it was an event. I think I was a judge in the Miss Universe at the time.
Right, sure.
And he said, I was like, do I need a bodyguard? He said, you're one of the most hated men in this country. This was right after apartheid. And he said, yeah, there were protests to take LA Law off the air in South Africa because of the interracial relationship that you had.
What do you feel in that moment when you hear that?
Scared.
Yeah.
Like, wait
fair
a minute.
Fair enough.
What's happening here? But he was big white South African guy. Paul was his name. And he was great. He just really took great care of us. But it's one of I share all these stories with you because it was moments like these when I realized there's an import, there's a gravity, there's a weight to playing a character like this at this time.
Yeah. Nowadays
you see black actors in all realms. That interracial relationship was only the second. There was another interracial kiss on LA Law with Michelle Green and I, and it was only the second interracial kiss on television.
In 1980?
1985, 86, around there. The first one was in, I think, 70, was Star Trek.
Right.
With Captain Kirk.
And then through these stories, you start to hear that, like, what we were doing was actually, unbeknownst to me, and it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning with this movie, is that, stories that are just stories that might be about sports, it might be about law, can actually have a much broader impact.
That's right, and can affect change and make people think.
I have one more person I wanted to ask you about with that. I heard a story that, because your character had gone to Harvard, was part of Harvard Law, you know what I'm going to ask, and then you got to go to the Harvard Law Society, and you met pre-politician young Barack Obama.
Right.
Is that right?
No, it's right. I forgot that until Barack Obama ran for president, and he was doing an article for the New York Times, and he says that they used to call him Blair Underwood on the campus at Harvard. So he says. So this is in the article. Then they call my manager, and they said, "Is that true?" And he called my man, Ron West, his name. He calls me. He said, "Is that true?" And I had to think about it. I said, "Oh, that was that big, tall guy with the big ears. That was him." Yeah.
So you don't have any memory of him being like, he was like this momentous, you could tell then that he was going to be a transformational.
No, but I do remember, and the way I remember this guy. I said, yeah, he had the big ears at the time. It was cool. Because he was the first black president of the Harvard Law Review.
Right.
And people said, you have to meet this guy. And I remember meeting him at a dinner we had that night.
I think as important as the stories you tell are the stories you don't tell. And I think as important are the yeses as the no's. And famously, and you've talked about this before, but famously you were offered this role on Sex and the City, which you ended up doing. Miranda's love interest, Dr. Robert Leeds, you turned down that role. And then through a dialogue with the people behind the show, ended up doing. I find this story really, really interesting because, again, it's about storytelling. It's about the power of these stories. Can you talk about a little bit about that?
Well, it goes back to my dad, again, and the way I was raised. And I had three mentors. I have three mentors in my life. Sidney Poitier, who became a friend and a mentor professionally, my dad personally, and then my bishop at home spiritually. So what happened with Sex and the City was they actually, Tom, they had offered me a different role. Sorry.
That's all right.
They had offered me a different role maybe 3 years prior to the Robert Leeds character that I ended up doing. And it really was, it was a storyline. If you're a fan of Sex and the City, people will remember this. Kim Cattrall's character, Samantha, had a storyline where she had a curiosity about black men and black men's anatomy, and she wanted to know if it was true. So that was the thrust of, no, that was the gist.
Sure, I got you. Yeah, thank you.
First a while.
I think we're still on the air. Go ahead. I think we haven't been taken off the air yet. Okay, continue.
That was not intentional.
Yeah, right.
But that was her storyline.
Sure.
And the producers reached out and invited me on the show, and I'm always grateful if anybody thinks of me. I don't take that lightly or take it for granted. I said thank you very much, but I'm going to pass. But the reason I passed, I didn't say this to them at the time, was I did not want to be a curiosity and play that type of character. So, they came back 2 years later with the Robert Leeds character, and we had that conversation with the producers. I said, well, is he the black guy? Is he the curiosity of these characters? Or can he just be a human being that that falls in love. And they said, no, it's the latter. We're not even going to really deal with race. I think it comes up one time somebody mentions it, but you're allowed to be a human being. And it really has been, and it worked out, and I loved it. I'm glad I did it, because I almost said no. And it's amazing. People remember it to this day. So I'm glad I did. It was remarkable. But I can't tell you how many times I've had that conversation with producers along the way to say, okay, what is your vision of this character? And are you going to allow me to be a full-fledged, well-rounded human being and character?
As someone who believes in storytelling so much,
Yeah.
someone who presents books, someone who, what is the power of these stories when we lead with humanity?
The inverse is that you don't see people as human, as ones with heart and soul and history and a continuity. And I think when you can lead with humanity, you see the humanness, you see the emotions, the highs and the lows, the wants and the needs, the complexities of that whole experience. It's been, I say, a fight early on. It's less of a fight nowadays, but it's been a focus to play those kind of characters and to, as a producer, make sure those characters existed. And that brings us full circle why I said yes to this role in Youngblood.
I also think it brings us full circle, because everything that I was reading said that when you say it was hard then, it's easier now. A lot of what I'm reading are actors saying it's easier now because of decisions you made and because of calls that actors like you made in the 80s and 90s. So I hope you can take that in yourself.
No, thank you. And we made those calls on the shoulders of giants like Sidney Poitier and James Earl Jones and Lou Gossett and so many others that came before us.
Thank you so much for coming in. Congrats on the role.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Lovely to have you. Yeah, Blair Underwood stars in the Canadian hockey film Youngblood, which just had its world premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival.